Hi, everyone. I hope you are doing well and that you had a great weekend. We are on to week 9. So this week I'm going to be reviewing your research proposals, check-ins that you submitted. So be on the lookout for feedback from those as I work through those. You'll see that in iCollege. So this week I am going to be talking about your midterm, a little bit about last week's perusal, and then really focusing in on the article critique assignment that you are going to do this week. So just to encourage you, this week is our last week studying quantitative design. So we are going to be learning about some different analytical methods that you can use to analyze studies that are designed with various different quantitative methods, whether it be experimental design, quasi-experimental, or non-experimental design. So this will be really helpful as you are thinking about analysis for your research project, and then also as you are evaluating your quantitative study that you are doing this week for your article critique. And this is the last week, and then next week we have Georgia State spring break, so you'll get a little break to decompress or get caught up on anything that you need to do, and then we just have the final countdown of the semester. Okay, so I wanted to go over some feedback from the midterm. Everyone did really well, so I was really pleased with how thoughtful the answers were, particularly the short answer questions. There was so much detail there, and I really could tell that you had a good understanding. So I wanted to go over a few of the multiple choice questions that a few people in the class missed. So these were the most commonly missed questions. So the first question came from chapter 1 about the different types of research. So the main thing that we talked about here was the difference between basic research and applied research. We also learned about action research, evaluation research, and critical research, but basic versus action versus applied research. So basic research is seeking, contributing general knowledge to the field, and applied research is applying that to specific settings. So here you can see in this question that the researcher has conducted several studies about a theory of school motivation. So this first sentence would be an example of basic research because it's general knowledge about motivation. So the researcher feels that they have validated their theory. So now she wants to see if how changing different aspects of the school classroom could lead to improvement. So now she is applying it to a specific setting. So that's why this question is applied research. So this question was an open-ended question about comparing and contrasting the criteria for critically analyzing research studies. So here I was looking for 3 different examples, maybe a difference in the introduction, a difference between the research questions, a difference between the data sources, and maybe a difference in the analysis. So one example might be the introduction of a quantitative study will list a hypothesis and the variable, where a qualitative study will talk about the overall purpose and the potential significance. In the data sources section, a quantitative study will include quantitative data sources such as educational tests, closed-ended surveys or questionnaires, whereas a qualitative data sources section will include data sources such as interviews, focus groups, observations, or other examples. And then in the data analysis section, a quantitative study would have statistical analyses to show the relationship between variables, and qualitative data analysis will have coding and have excerpts from the participants from the data sources collected, such as participant interviews, to talk about the themes identified. And this is what you'll be doing this week for your article critique. So that is exactly right. Okay, so this question was about validity. So constructing an instrument to measure attitudes towards exercise. So they're making sure that all of the items on the instrument, like maybe think for this instrument, it's probably some type of test or questionnaire, and they are making sure that all of the items are adequately representing attitudes towards exercise. So this is trying to focus in on content-related evidence validity, trying to make sure that the measure is actually capturing the content related to attitudes around exercise. So this example here, so we have a study about a reading strategy, and they are adjusting the post-test scores because the students in the control classroom were higher on their pretest. So here they are using a statistical measure of control analysis of covariance to make sure that they are controlling for the differences in the pretest. So this week in our chapter, in our perusal, or last week in perusal 8, we really reviewed a lot of those different controls. So hopefully you have a better understanding now, or an even better understanding of the different methods that quantitative researchers can use to control for any potentially extraneous variables. Okay, so this question I think was the most commonly missed question, and I think the word "not" maybe threw a few people off. So which one is not true about stratified random sampling? So this was a question about sampling or choosing participants for a quantitative study that is using random sampling. However, for stratified random sampling, the researcher creates a list of different categories. Maybe it's based on years of experience. Maybe they want to give a survey to teachers who have been teaching, and they are going to have several different buckets. Maybe teachers who have been teaching 0 to 5 years, teachers who have been teaching 6 to 10, and then teachers who have been teaching 11 to 15, and then 16 plus. So they have these different groups. And then within each category, they use random sampling. So it does involve a selection process from identified subgroups. So that is true. Proportions of groups must always match the population. That's not true. So it can be like here, where if it is proportional to the overall population, then the random sampling would yield a representative sample. So that's true. But since it doesn't have to be proportional, sometimes disproportional sampling can be helpful to get a large enough number of participants when you want to compare between subgroups. So in the example that I gave where teaching experience, there's a lot more teachers in the 0 to 5 range than in the 16 plus range. So if you wanted to compare the maybe attitudes from your survey result of teachers based on years of experience using a random sampling technique, stratified random sampling could help you, because since there are fewer teachers in there, if you just use random sampling, you would get an overrepresentation of teachers in that 0 to 5 year place if you were looking to compare years of experience. So based on what you are trying to understand in your study, stratified random sampling could be helpful, and it could even be disproportional to the overall population. So for this one, the only one that is not true is stratified random sampling. And I believe that this is on page 273 of the textbook. There are sections about each of these if you want to read more about that question. And then lastly, so here we have an example comparing the effectiveness of 2 different tutoring programs. So there you can see the different variables. So for schools who are going to help them, so they are not allowed to use random assignment. So that is key. Random assignment would be for experimental design. So that eliminates the top 2. So random assignment is not being used, so it cannot be experimental design. So it's either quasi-experimental design or multiple baseline design. Multiple baseline design is not something that we've studied, but we have studied quasi-experimental design. Quasi-experimental design is when you can manipulate the independent variable. However, due to a logistical reason, you are not able to use random assignment. So that's why this is quasi-experimental design. And then if there are other questions on the midterm that you still have questions about, I try to give individual feedback where needed. Please email me and I will go over those with you. or come to Zoom. This week we are having Zoom. I can go over anything there. So for perusal aid, I appreciate all of your feedback about the visual here. So here are the main types of quantitative design that we have studied: experimental research, quasi-experimental research, and non-experimental. So this week we were focusing in on non-experimental. So non-experimental is different from experimental research. Experimental research because you cannot manipulate the independent variable. So the first one here, D, independent variables are not manipulated, and they are because they're variables that are just not possible to be manipulated. And you did a great job in perusal giving some examples of those. Now, the third variable problem is when there is a possibility that an extraneous variable is the reason for the relationship that you identified between two variables. And so that's why it's so important to choose an appropriate method to control. So do be on the lookout for that this week. And when you're doing your article critique, what methods did the researchers use to control for any possible extraneous variables? Now, to lessen the third variable problem, you need to use a control technique. So even in non-experimental research, it is possible to control for extraneous variables. Those are what all those methods are. Okay, so in this example, they did a study and they found that income is related to school achievement. However, you could find that that relationship is not true, that the income is directly correlated to school achievement if you control for if there's no relationship once you control for parent education. So that once you control for that, you don't find that relationship, then you can see that you do have an extraneous variable there. So here we have an example where they are looking at reading and school achievement. And so in the control group and the experimental group, one variable that could be a potentially extraneous variable is IQ level. And so they're using matching to make sure that the groups are as balanced as possible by pairing the students off based on IQ and putting similar students in the experimental group and the control group. So that is an instance of matching. So here, if you think that gender might be an extraneous variable, so you only use them, then that's holding the extraneous variable constant. If you wanted to use holding the extraneous variable constant for number 5, you would only enroll children with the same IQ. But since this one has different IQs, you can use matching. You could also use statistical control, but they didn't do that here. Okay, so analysis of covariance is one type of statistical control. And so this is a really common type of control that you will see in a lot of studies. And so when you are collecting data points from different types of people, this is a cross-sectional study where over time, or different types of people to give you a perspective based on their different points of view. Okay, so let's talk about the big assignment for this week, which is your article critique assignment. This assignment is due by the end of the week, and it is worth 10 points. So everyone has chosen an article, and everyone has an article that is using a type of quantitative design. So you will be doing this assignment in perusal. So I put a link in iCollege, and if you want to find it, you can go to if you're already in perusal, maybe working on perusal number 9 or perusal number 8, you can go over here to go to course home. You'll see the little home icon on the left, course home, and you can toggle over to assignments. And if you scroll down to assignments, you will see article critique number 1, and you will also see the sample that I prepared for you. But this one is an independent assignment, so everyone has been assigned this here in perusal. If you go again, course home and assignments, you will see the assignment article critique 1, quantitative design. And so once you see the assignment, you'll see the checklist. And then once you open the assignment, you will see the article that you chose, and email me if I made a mistake. So this is the checklist from chapter 4 of our text. This is table 4.2, and this is all about how to evaluate quantitative studies. So as you can see, there are some things to think about in the introduction, some things to think about in the method section, in the results section, in the discussion, and then your final evaluation of the study. So these headings are very common, and so the studies that you are reviewing will likely have some similar headings that you can use to break this down. Now, as you can see here, there are 28 questions. Now, you don't need to answer all 28 questions. Some of them might not even be applicable to the study that you chose. So for your assignment, I'm looking for 10 high quality annotations. So at least 10 places where you are talking about the research design and making connections with the course content there. So these questions can help guide you in the right direction. If you're feeling stuck, you can go through some of these and think about some of the questions that you might want to talk about. So like research purpose. So you can look for the research purpose in the introduction. So once you find it, you can highlight that section. You can say the purpose of this research was to, and then shortly describe what it was. Research questions. So highlight the research questions. This study has 2 research questions. The variables are clearly identified, and you can tell that they're trying to find a relationship. So this checklist is here for you if you're feeling stuck. Again, you're not answering all 28, looking for a total of 10 annotations, but these can help guide you in the right direction and point you in the right direction for what to look for in your quantitative study. So this is how you will be scored. So looking for at least 10 annotations across the article. So don't just put them all in the introduction. So some in the introduction, the method section, the results, and then your final ones for the conclusion. So these annotations will maybe be a little bit longer than the ones that you do for your perusal for the course, for the weekly course discussions. They'll probably be about 3 to 6 sentences each. So you may incorporate the questions from the checklist. And then one recommendation is to really make connections to the course content and the ideas presented in the text. So we've learned all about the purpose of quantitative design. So you might talk about that. We've learned about variables. We've learned about sampling. So look at that. How do they choose the participants? We've looked at data sources. What are the data sources that they use? And then this week, you're going to be reading about analysis. So look at that too. So here you can see I'm making connections to the course content, test hypotheses. I talked about the research. I talked about maybe the type applied research because research purpose is clearly stated, independent variable. So any connection that you can make to the course, anything about reliability, anything about validity, anything about controlling for extraneous variables, any questions that you have, maybe you're wondering why didn't they control for an extraneous variable that you're thinking of? That is all about your critique. So the purpose for this assignment is I want to know, are you able to apply what you've learned to be able to read a peer-reviewed published article and be able to analyze it in terms of, does it have everything it should have? What are you thinking about the way that they designed the study? Are you able to find the different components that should be there? And then give your own feedback and reaction to the article. So there is a sample. Let me show you where the sample is. So there is the sample that I've done for you in Perusal. So this is also linked in iCollege. So this is what the title is: Sample Article Critique Assignment, Quantitative Design. Of course, this is not, you don't need to write anything on this. This is just for you to see what it looks like. So this is an article that I used in last week's lecture as well. So when you click on it, you can look at all of the comments. These are annotations that I did just to show you an example of what it looks like. So here you can see I wrote an annotation about the research purpose. I wrote, this is another one about the research purpose. So I'm highlighting a portion of the text and then writing my annotation and my critique. Research questions, talking about that. relevant citations for their literature review, the theory, the framework or theory that is used, again, about the literature review, the method, talked about it being a quantitative study with quantitative variables, the sample instruments. So those are all the connections to the course content. Sampling, talked about how they sampled. Data collection, went into detail about the data collection and the data sources that they used and how they did it. The instruments that they used, and then data analysis, how they analyze their data. And so for data analysis, that's what we're going to be reading this week, chapters 18 and 19. So you can incorporate those readings too in your critique. Then I think this is coming back to the research question again, effect size, which is something that you'll read about with data analysis, and then their findings, any limitations that they mention. Ethics. I forgot to mention that ethics is a great thing to talk about, and you can make connections and give your opinion and talk about what did they do to ensure ethics, and then any of your thoughts about this. And then I have my final evaluation at the end, strengths and weaknesses. So this sample is here for you just to see an example of what your research, your article critique can look like. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So I ended up having about 18 annotations, but your goal is to have 10 high quality. So that is there for you to see an example of what a completed one will look like. Okay, so your checklist for the week. And again, this is our last week before spring break, so you're going to get a little break after this. But so we are reading 2 chapters this week, chapters 18 and 19, and those are about data analysis for quantitative design. So once you've collected those surveys, the instruments, once you have your quantitative data, what methods do researchers use to identify whether or not there is a relationship between their variables? And that is for perusal 9. Then you will also submit the article critique number 1. There is a Zoom this week, an optional Zoom, if you prefer to do that versus write your annotations in perusal. And then we do have Georgia State spring break coming up next week. So that is your checklist for this week. Please email me if you have any questions, and I hope to see you on Zoom. And if not, I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.